Men of Reddit who proposed and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? My mother told my father no 3 times. On the 3rd time, he got wasted at the local bar and basically started pouring his heart out to anyone who would listen. Mind you, it's a very small village in the Italian Alps, and my father barely spoke Italian, and no one in the village spoke English, including my mother. Word got back to my mother about this sad American at the bar, so she went to find him and she told him that she'd marry him. My parents celebrated their 44th anniversary last month. Bro, it's women like this that give hope to the annoying, desperate male characters that want girlfriends in most anime. She was an art major and I had just joined the army. We had been lovers since high school. I asked and she said no. She wanted to get her master's. We were friends for a while, but we don't talk anymore. She works as a bartender now, I think. I ended up getting married to my best friend. We've been married for more than a decade and we have a 5-year-old son. Oh, I have a story about this. My friend had been with his girlfriend for years, so he decided he wanted to propose. What he didn't know is that she was also thinking about proposing to him. He proposed first and she freaked out because she had already set up her proposal and bought a ring, so she said no. Over the next week, she freaked out more and more and refused to answer his calls or messages. My friend then decided to use the money he had saved up to buy a plane ticket to Europe. What was supposed to be a 3-month trip through Western Europe turned out to be a year-long trip around the world. One day he says that he's coming back and she decides to go and wait for him at the airport and propose there. It turns out that while being in Peru, he met a girl and they fell in love almost immediately, and he got married in Peru. Cue 5 years later, he and his Peruvian wife are still very happily married and recently had a baby, while his ex still hasn't quite forgiven herself for ruining her relationship with him. At first, I thought this was going to be the typical one proposed and the other takes out their ring and makes it a double proposal, but this definitely had a turn that I wasn't expecting. I mean, how dumb can you be to let someone you wanted to marry leave the country for 3 months and let it turn into a year? Pretty idiotic if you ask me. My mom actually said no to my dad's proposal when they were younger, not because they weren't in love, but because she wasn't sure if it was something she actually wanted to do, rather than something that society expected of her or whatever. They still stayed together and had kids, hence why you're reading this now. And when my dad was terminally ill a few years ago, my mom plucked up the courage and asked him. Just to get back at her after all of those years, he said no, before taking up her offer a few days later. He died a happy man. For a bit more of context on this, it was actually 2 declined proposals, not just 1, both pre-children too, so let's say I'm lucky. Also, when they did get married, it wasn't purely an action for the estate or whatever. They already had their wills sorted out. It was just one of those last great days as a family type things. In fact, my sister and I were the only 2 present at the registry office. And when I say office, they literally squeezed us into one of the registry offices as there was a big waiting list for weddings, and we didn't know how long he had. He died 3 months later, so we were all hugely grateful for them helping us out with this. As a woman who got engaged and the proposal was later revoked, it still stings a little 11 years later. When you are so sure you're with the love of your life, losing them can really pop a hole into your life plans. We met in her home country of Germany while I was traveling. I knew I was in love. We dated long distance for a while. Me flying to Europe, her flying to the US. I suggested marriage so we could be together. She said no a few times. I didn't press, but I was patient and not being pushy. I knew she was worth the wait. Then it hit her that's how we could be together. If we got married, we could live in a country together. That was a difficulty of being born on different patches of dirt. A few years later, I'm still married to my best friend and living with her in Germany. Not all no's stay no. Life goes on. We lived together for another 6 years until she changed her mind and told me that I should ask again. We were engaged for over a year and got married in 1991. We are still married and have 3 children, and we are both still very much in love. I find it crazy that relationships still continue after a proposal rejection. Because on one hand, it feels like the rejection is saying, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. But I guess on the other hand, the person might just be against the idea of marriage. Which is fair, because you don't want to marry someone who is against the idea of marriage. I mean, look at Will Smith and his entanglement. My dad proposed to a woman who said no. My dad was a violent alcoholic, and she said she couldn't be with him unless he got clean. Took him a little while, but he did just that. He wound up meeting my mom through a matchmaker, and they've been married for 25 years. If that woman never said no to him, he would have never gotten clean. It was the lowest point in his life, but it all brought him to my mom, who makes him happier than ever. She had cancer. I said we should get married because I had full medical coverage from my work. She said no. And over time, we grew apart. I haven't talked to her in 15 years. I don't know if she died. I knew a couple who did just that. He proposed in order to give her citizenship and health insurance, so she could remain here and get cancer treatment she desperately needed. They stayed married for about 15 years and he even adopted her son, but they never lived together or were romantically involved. Years later, they divorced when he met the woman of his dreams and wanted to get married. They were all very close friends, with no drama. She lived and is a university professor now. He's in another state with the woman of his dreams. Phoebe Buffay, is that you? So this actor, Patrick Moot, proposed to his girlfriend at a basketball game and gets turned down while on a giant jumbotron. Clip goes viral on YouTube, Facebook, etc. She tells him later that she turned him down because she thinks his pee-pee is too small. So he travels around the world documenting what other cultures think about pee-pee size, pee-pee enlargement, and made a movie about it called Unhung Hero. I've never watched it, but the title alone makes me laugh. I've never heard of this film before, but I do agree. I think it's a great title, and I'm interested in watching it now. This is the story of my parents. My dad asked my mom to marry him several times. She said no several times. One day, my dad asked my mom to marry him yet again, and she said yes. He freaked out and left her apartment and dumped her. 3 weeks later, he hated his life without her and begged her to take him back and marry him. They were married 9 months later for 16 years until my mom passed from cancer. They loved each other so much and they had such a deep appreciation for each other. That was 25 years ago. My dad has not remarried. No one will ever come close to my mama. Dated a woman for over 2 years and popped the question. First time she said, I don't know. A couple of months later I asked again. She said, maybe. I was pretty bent out of shape. But then I found out that she was sleeping with several of my friends, so I dodged a bullet there, really. Damn, dude, I'm sorry about your friends, genuine crap bags of people, to knowingly sleep with your girl. I hope you find better friends. Dude, that would literally break me. Like, cheating is crappy if it's a coworker or someone you don't trust. It's 1,000 times better than going to vent to your friend about your girl cheating, and he's like, yeah, I'm the other guy. It happened to a friend of mine, and honestly, I think it did break him. His girlfriend slept with his oldest friend. This was a couple of years ago. I remained friends with the guy for a while afterwards, and his personality within the relationship just seemed to, for a lack of a better word, crumpled. She continued to sleep with other guys and manipulated him into blaming himself for the unfaithfulness. I think most people would agree that cheaters belong in the trash, set on fire, and then thrown off a cliff. FYI, that was just a figure of speech, don't take it literally. We received a letter from the immigration office saying that she was lacking some documents. At the moment, we were stressed, both of us with work and study, and none of us were sufficiently fluent enough in German to decipher this kind of language. We went to the university office for foreign students. The lady in charge translated the letter badly, telling us that even with presenting the documents, they would proceed with the deportation process. We panicked, looking for some more help. We ended up at City Hall. With the adrenaline rush, I proposed to her in quite a loud voice. If we got married, could we stop the deportation? Is what I said to the poor guy in the information office. I can't remember if he gave us an answer. I want to marry her. Will you marry me? She started laughing. I started laughing. The guy in the office gave us a telephone to the pertinent department and asked us to call. We went out of the city hall and we couldn't stop laughing. She said to me, well, thank you, but let's wait a bit. After the weekend, we went to the immigration office and the people there explained which documents were missing and how to get them. She wasn't denied the visa and we kept living in the same way as we planned. It was intense and, in retrospect, pretty funny. My mom and dad were not married but wanted a kid and had me. My dad, being a Catholic and Hispanic, decided he wanted to be married to my mom and proposed. She said no because she hadn't been divorced from her first husband for very long and now had 3 kids and preferred to stay unmarried. He threatened to leave her and got on his motorcycle and started to drive away until my mom chased him down and gave in, leading to what my parents call the voodoo wedding the same day. I'm gonna need more details about this voodoo wedding if you have them. From my understanding, the way it went down was they immediately flipped through a phone book looking for someone who could marry them for free the same day. They eventually came across a small mom and pop store / restaurant in a bad part of town called The Cut that agreed to do it in a back room using their waitstaff as the witnesses. It was a quick 5-minute ceremony that ended with the officiant making them eat a meal with them. To their dismay, they were charged for all of it and had to run home and break open the quarter jar. Okay, look. I get men can be very dramatic at times and act this way when getting rejected, but my guys, we really need to sit back and reevaluate how we handle rejection. Getting someone to marry you out of pure pity is not the strat. I was a young Marine and I was only home during the weekends. I was dating this girl for about a year from my hometown. When I asked, she said yes. Her dad, who was former Navy, kept saying that we should wait. We put it off for a bit longer. Fast forward another year, she dumped me. Father informs me that she had been sleeping with a lot of guys, like more than 50 over the last 2 years that we dated, and was very happy I didn't marry her, and he apologized for her bad behavior. She then totally ghosted everyone in her family for about 6 months. Find out she moved 7 hours away and was living under a house, and I don't mean in a basement. Literally under a house with a new BF. She calls her mom to come get her. The mother and father asked me if I could go get her and bring her home. Good times, good times. That would have been a big hell nah from me, my guys. I asked her right out of high school and she said she wasn't ready. We stayed together, went to college at the same school, spent the first year in separate dorms, then moved in together, got married a few years later. Our 20th is coming up. In 2017, Google came up with this idea to allow you to make photo books out of your Google Photos account. My girlfriend and I had been dating for almost 2 years, and I knew that she was the one that I wanted to marry. So I created this wonderful photo book of all the selfies of us together, and ended it with a page made out of photos I generated that say, "Will you marry me?" I then proceeded to put all of these into an album and build the photo book. What didn't occur to me at the time was that the album I put these in was a shared album, and other people get notifications when you add new photos to it. And the other person that this album was shared with? My girlfriend. That evening, we had dinner and it all came out. She saw the photo and she wasn't ready. There were a few reasons why, and they were good reasons and smart reasons, mostly to do with timing, family, and finances. We weren't breaking up, we just weren't getting engaged at that time. A year later, we had successfully discussed the concept of getting married. We went ring shopping, she picked out her own ring, and by the time I actually did propose, we both knew what the answer would be. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary in April. It seems to have worked out so far, and the photo book is on my shelf to my left as we speak. I'm a firm believer that the only surprise in a proposal should be how you're proposing, not that you are. She or he should know that it's going to happen at some point, but not how. Marriage is a big deal and should be discussed extensively beforehand as it is a huge legal agreement. I'm glad it ended up working out for you. The photo book idea was really sweet. My mom told my dad no when he proposed to her, even though they were already living together. She thought he was impotent, and it wasn't until she got pregnant that she said yes. In retrospect, I wish my parents would have decided earlier in their relationship that they could barely stand each other. That's a big oof for the OP, but money and kids have to be the two biggest reasons people don't get together, right? I spoke to her about it beforehand, and she seemed really keen on the idea, so I decided to propose about a week after in front of all of her friends. She was so shocked she picked me up off my knee and shooed me away. Most of her friends were confused because everyone knew what was going to happen, and she said that she was excited for it. I didn't know what to do. It was all really embarrassing, and later on she explained that she didn't mean no, she just didn't know what to say and was scared. She said yes after apologizing profusely, and just this year we celebrated our 9th anniversary. Not my story, but someone I'm friends with. They both had crappy homes and became a couple at 14. Somewhere around 20, he proposed to her. She said that she wasn't ready to commit yet. After that, he proposed every year partially in hopes that she would be ready, but it was also kind of a ritual where he would just show her that he's still serious. She would say no every time. In their late 20s, he was done with his studies. She could see the finish line, so she told him that she's ready, meaning marriage and eventually children. That's when he got second thoughts about marrying the only woman he had ever had a relationship with, and he wasn't sure if he was making a mistake. They went on a break. She went to the US from Europe to do her PhD at MIT. They eventually drifted apart more. She moved on and found a new long-term relationship with a partner that's a lot better for her. while he quickly regretted ending the relationship and started hooking up with whoever he could find on Tinder without being able to form a meaningful relationship after. That's what a lot of people would call fumbling the bag. My mom rejected my dad the first 2 times. There was no real hard feelings between them. I guess my mother just wasn't ready for marriage yet. She ended up proposing to him. My grandmother and my mother sewed a suit for their dog to wear and attached a sign around his neck with a ring that read, "Will you marry me?" Then she sent the dog into the kitchen to beg for scraps while my father was preparing dinner. The next thing she heard was a very concerned voice shouting, "Honey, the dog is asking to marry me!" Cue absolute hysterics. My dad said yes to the proposal. My human dad and my human mom are still married 2 years later. We'd been dating for a year and a half, and I was due to move out on orders. Was in the army. She suggested we get married. I said, no way. I'm going off to school, army type, for 6 months and then a year on deployment to the Middle East. It just wouldn't work. She was calm and then said, "You think I'll be a burden to all of that, but I'll actually be a help." Well, just seconds earlier, all I could think of was what a pain in the butt it would be to get married and leave, and now, for whatever reason, it seemed perfectly reasonable that she was right. We got married a week later at the courthouse. I was 22. Last month, we had a really nice social distance dinner party for our 29th anniversary with our 2 amazing kids and a few friends. For non-military people listening to this, could you marry someone in the military? Personally, I don't think I could, but that's probably because I've come across too many people that have been in the military that are unfaithful. She said yes, as I had a special occasion planned, one of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top, and we were on our way to a family event, and I had the ring made and everything. Then a few days later, she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance, other side of the world. When I visited, it would be super awkward. Eventually, her dad kicked me out. I was flying standby and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I am happily married and I'm glad it never worked out. I wasn't in a good place when I had met her and her family was super controlling. It would have never worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than I expected. We were dating for a little over a year, but I was so sure she was the one. I drove 2 hours to see her at college and went on a beautiful winter night walk and proposed. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "Oh, you thought this was serious? Well, I don't know how to say this other than that I've been seeing other people. Well, actually, I have been seeing other women." I was stunned. I got up, put the ring in my pocket, and walked to my car. Got in and drove away, never looking back and crying the whole time. Haven't seen or spoken with her in 7 years, even though she's tried countless times to reach out. Now it's a story I tell my friends who are nervous about asking their significant others to marry them, reminding them that even if they say no, it could be worse. Well, about 2 years later, I met my wife of 22 years. We are happily married. The one that said no got married for the first time last year and seems happy. My wife is way into me in ways that the former girlfriend was never, and I see that my life is far more happier with my wife than the one that said no. She's not a bad person. I was just young and in love with someone that wasn't in love with me. It worked out for the best. I'm glad she said no. Not sure if this counts, but I did propose. She said yes, but 1 month before the wedding, she took it back. This is what happened immediately with my life. I personally lost $3,000 worth of deposits. My parents and her parents lost about $4,000 each on deposits. Me and my parents are working class, so it took us years for us to financially recover from this. I spent about $2,200 on the ring I didn't want. That was my biggest regret, and I will say that to anyone who listens. The engagement ring chain I bought it from wouldn't take it back. I took it to pawn shops and they'd only offer a few hundred. This engagement ring store banked on customers who wanted the whole ring. Stone, band, setting. If you're going to buy a ring, just buy the stone. For the gold band setting, you can get that at a local jewelry store. Apparently my gem that I bought was crap. Most of the cost of the ring was BS. Most of my family was from out of state, and a lot of them were pissed because they had to cancel their flights. I had to go to the ER because I didn't leave my room. I couldn't take any calls because everyone was so pissed and I didn't want to hear it. I was depressed and just stayed in bed. One day, my roommates grabbed me and took me to the ER where the doctor treated me for severe dehydration and an infection. What happened when I got over it? I became stronger for it. I didn't propose to anyone until a decade later. Honestly, there wasn't anyone that I loved deeply enough to be committed in a relationship. But when I proposed, I was in my 30s. Our relationship was more mature than the first time I proposed. We've now been married for 13 years. She's my best friend. When I have good news, she's the first person I want to tell. And when I have bad news, she's the first person I want to tell. I also financially recovered as well. I learned my lesson about the engagement ring. Only paid $300 for it. She loved it and treasures it. After our 10-year milestone, we were doing so well, I took her to pick out a new wedding ring at any cost. She refused, and she still wears the cheap $300 ring and loves it. That's it for this video. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Link at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. It's linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.